And I think Chief Superintendent Andy Brittain, who spoke about this death yesterday, explains exactly why it has made it onto the front pages. Here's what he had to say.
Sadly, despite their efforts, a 15-year-old girl died at the scene. This is every parent's worst nightmare, and I know the officers who responded this morning, along with our emergency service colleagues, are devastated at the victim's death.
Every parent's worst nightmare, and it really is, isn't it? You've been getting in touch all morning. Lots of texts and tweets coming in. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to 87222 and give us a call, and send us a tweet as well at TalkTV. I'll get to as many as I can before the bottom of the hour. First up there, let's talk to former Metropolitan Police officer Chris Hobbs. Good morning to you, Chris.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. I mean, look, a 7-year-old boy has been arrested and questioned by police. So obviously there's some aspects of this we can't discuss. But from what we know that's in the public domain already, this is something that I think a lot of people feel could have happened to their child. And it is every parent's worst nightmare. And this is why people feel it so strongly. You don't have to be living in Croydon or in South London or in London. You can be in any town or city in this country and you can still feel the same fear for your teenager leaving the house in the morning. What was your reaction when you saw the news?
Yeah, it was absolutely, I was horrified, and I actually saw a little clip of the two police officers first on the scene doing their best for the girl, and it almost moved me to tears, to be quite honest. But this is a plague. It's a plague that's across the country. It's linked in with youth culture, with gang crime, and carrying a knife is almost a fashion accessory. Almost 13,000 knife crime offences in London last year, 50,000 across the country, an increase of 75% over the last 10 years. So we really are facing a major, serious problem that a lot of the time, as you rightly point out, doesn't really get the attention it deserves. This is
and it's written off, isn't it? I mean, again, I remember talking about this genuinely on air 10 years ago. On a different station, when there was a young black boy and he was stabbed to death, and it made a news in brief and not a front page, and I was incensed by this, and I knew that if it had been my white middle-class daughter, it would have made the front pages, but it didn't, because we just basically written this off. And that's what people have done. They've gone, oh, well, it's these gangs, it's these kids from sink estates, it's not our problem, it happens over there, not a problem. We've seen in recent years where it is happening over here, but also those children's lives matter just as much, and those children are growing up in a very different world from the rest of us.
I think that's right. It's obviously more prevalent, isn't it, in the poorer areas where you do get the gangs and you do get increased knife crime as opposed to the nicer areas. But I think everyone is affected by this. And the culture runs deep. If you go on to social media, the gangs have got their own news channel. The gangs produce documentaries, gang documentaries. If you're in a school in some of these inner city areas, that gang culture affects the school. You may have young gang members within that school. So there's a huge challenge here. And at the moment, for one reason or another, that challenge isn't being met. Every so often, you get the mayor's office or the government producing a paper on how to tackle youth violence, how to tackle knife crime. The same things appear, and at the end of the day, nothing changes, and then we get something as horrendous as this. It's very frustrating, and very frustrating too for the police officers who are out there, despite all the bad publicity, and we've had more this morning, who do their best and are often first on the scene trying to save these people's lives. Sometimes succeed in that, they never get any credit for that, and sometimes they have to watch somebody die in front of them.
And again, we had that as Chief Superintendent Andy Brittain say, how distressing this is often for the emergency workers. I think it's never a disservice to good police officers to call out bad police officers. I think you're doing a good job for those good police officers. We know the vast majority are, but we've got other issues going on. I mean, again, look, we've got this thing where no one's dealing with shoplifting, burglaries. Now they're saying, oh, you're going to have to go to every burglary. The fact that needs to be said. We've got police interfering with people who are putting up even taking a photograph of a sort of a trans poster and being questioned by police. We've got the police spending their time doing completely the wrong things and not worrying about keeping us safe and keeping lawlessness off our streets. And I agree with you. We have got a massive issue that I don't think can be solved just by the police, but the police would be a good start. And if kids feared, mum and dad, feared their teachers, feared people coming up on the street, other adults, if they feared the authorities in any way at all, and they felt at any point they might actually get punished for doing what they do, maybe things would be a bit better.
Well, there has been talk, hasn't there, about if you carry a knife second time, you're off, you're put inside into a young offenders institute or to prison. I don't think really there's a deterrent. And the other thing, Julia, is the amount of knife crime that goes on that isn't reported. A huge amount of knife crime, and you see it again on gang social media, that occurs where someone gets stabbed, it's not serious enough to go to hospital, they repair the wound with super glue, or there's a backstreet industry of stitching people up. So even the knife crime figures we see don't really...
Wow. That is very telling, because we know there's a knife wound. The A&E are supposed to call the police and get them involved. Look, we've had this ongoing issue over the officer who has been charged with murder after the shooting of a young man in South London a year ago, in September last year in South London. There's an issue there with Met police officers talking about how if they're armed, they're going to basically en masse walk out if this officer, courts decide next week that he or she should be named in this case. They're already angry that this person is already facing charges. We've now got a new development. Another Metropolitan Firearms officer who's a marksman known only as W80, he's never been named publicly, who shot dead a known gangster, by the way, Jermaine Baker, in a police operation back in 2015. There was he was preparing to spring 2 prisoners from Wood Green Crown Court in North London. Shots were fired. This Met Firearms officer has not faced any criminal charges, was found not to have committed a criminal offence. And yet now we find out, years later, 8 years later, he is going to be facing a gross misconduct hearing that could result in him being sacked. This is exactly what a lot of officers are talking about, that they do their job in the course of their duties, and if they do exactly what they've been told to do, their training tells them to do, they could face not just, criminal proceedings, but misconduct proceedings, and it never ends.
Absolutely. And I've said this recently. Years ago, as a young DC, I was what the Met used to call an authorised shot. Somebody I knew shot somebody on the streets of London. I saw him months later. He'd been cleared at court. I barely recognised him.
Yeah.
He'd aged 20 years. Now, this is the problem. Again, this puts strain on all firearms officers. They wonder what's going to happen if they pull the trigger. And also, and the phrase that I haven't heard, he who hesitates is lost, or she.
Yeah.
The same thing.
Someone else could lose their life if they get it wrong. I think that's where many of us are at on this. Chris Hobbs, we'll leave it at times against us, but former Metropolitan Police Officer Chris Hobbs, thank you so much for joining us.